I knew something was off the moment I pulled into my driveway and saw the garage door halfway open. Not broken, just stuck. Again. That's when I saw the bumper of a champagne-colored Lexus peeking out from inside. I didn't recognize it. I live alone, I don't throw parties, and I sure as hell don't let anyone park in my garage. I'm Zeke Zimmerman. 38, recently divorced, and finally bought my own house free from drama, or so I thought. I moved into this quiet little cul-de-sac 6 months ago, hoping for some peace. What I got instead was a nosy HOA and the queen of entitlement herself, Beverly Cranston, middle-aged, sharp bob haircut, always wearing some pastel cardigan and clutching her clipboard like it's a holy relic. She's the president of our HOA, of course. Friendly as a cactus dipped in vinegar. We've had our run-ins. She's fined me for aggressive wind chimes and non-compliant lawn edge symmetry. Yeah, real crimes, but this was new. I yanked the garage door all the way up and stared. Beverly's Lexus was fully parked in my garage like it belonged there, clean, untouched. Like it was waiting for a valet. I stood there for a second, half expecting Ashton Kutcher to jump out and yell I was being punked. Instead, my neighbor across the street, Dave, waved at me while mowing his lawn. "You see her put this here?" I called. He killed the mower and looked over. "Yeah, Bev said she had to keep it out of the sun, claimed you were out of town." I blinked. "Did I look out of town to you?" Dave shrugged. "Man, I don't get involved." I stormed up to Beverly's house, 3 doors down, and banged on her door. She opened it like she was expecting me, all innocent eyes and artificial concern. "Oh, Zeke," she said, dragging out my name like a guilty kid caught stealing cookies. "I assumed you were on your little camping trip already. Your garage was open, and I simply couldn't let my car get scratched by the wind." "You assumed wrong," I said, "and you trespassed. That's private property." She sniffed. "Technically, as HOA president, I have access to shared community structures in emergency cases. And I'd say protecting my vehicle from hail qualifies. It's my garage, on my lot, not a shared community structure, Beverly." She folded her arms. "There's no reason to get aggressive." "I'm not being aggressive," I said, turning away, "but I am locking my garage." "You've got 10 minutes to move your car." I walked back home. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I checked. Car was still there, so I locked the garage from the inside, shoved the manual override so it couldn't be opened from the outside, and hopped into my truck. I had a 3-day weekend planned upstate in the mountains, and I wasn't about to let HOA Karen ruin it. Before I left a note taped on the inside of the garage door. "Next time, ask." Then I drove off, radio blasting, windows down, and not a single ounce of guilt in my chest. 3 days later, I rolled back into town smelling like pine needles and campfire smoke, still riding that post-hike high. My boots hit the driveway gravel just as the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the cul-de-sac. I noticed a few neighbors lingering on their porches, pretending not to watch as I popped open the garage. There it was, Beverly's Lexus, still parked like it had paid rent. Except now, the windshield had a spiderweb crack and the rear bumper bore a fresh dent. I frowned. I hadn't touched it. I'd locked the place tight and hadn't even left the key with anyone. I didn't have long to ponder it. A sheriff's cruiser rolled up slowly, lights off but unmistakable. Deputy Morales stepped out. Local guy, always looked like he was 2 weeks from retirement and didn't need drama in his life. "You Zeke Zimmerman?" I nodded, dusting off my jeans. "What's going on?" Got a vehicle complaint. Owners claiming her car was unlawfully detained and damaged. Says you locked it in your garage and refused to return it. Unlawfully detained, I raised an eyebrow. It was parked in my garage. Without permission, I wasn't even in town. He looked at me, then at the car. "You got proof you weren't here?" I pulled my phone and showed him the GPS log from my hiking app. Dates, times, elevation changes. A solid 3-day trek halfway up the Adirondacks. I even had a time-stamped gas receipt from a station 200 miles north. He flipped through the photos, silent. "She say how it got dented?" I asked. She's saying you're responsible. Wants to file criminal charges trespassing, vehicle damage, unlawful restraint. Unlawful restraint of a Lexus, I blinked. That's a new one, he didn't laugh. Look, I didn't touch her car. Garage was locked. I've got security footage too. I led him inside and pulled up the feed from the indoor cam I'd installed after the last time someone tried to leave flyers in my laundry room. Sure enough, the footage showed Beverly's car sitting undisturbed for 3 days straight. No one entered. No movement. Just an empty house with a silent car baking in the dark. Morales leaned in. You mind if I take this? Not at all. He copied the file to his drive. She didn't mention a camera. Didn't think she would. He gave me a long look. You want to press charges for trespassing? I shrugged. Not yet. I'll give her a chance to walk it back. But Beverly didn't walk anything back. The next day, I found a certified letter in my mailbox. HOA stationery, all caps. She was fining me $300 for unauthorized use of property and willful obstruction of vehicular access. She'd also scheduled an emergency board meeting at her house, naturally to review sanctions. I wasn't about to let that slide. I spent the afternoon digging. County property maps, HOA bylaws, zoning language. I even called my cousin, Lee, who works as a paralegal in Albany. She sent over a breakdown of New York State's property rights and easement laws. Spoiler: nowhere in there does it say a nosy busybody can commandeer your garage like it's a public shelter. That night, I showed up at Beverly's house wearing the same dusty boots I'd worn up the mountain. Her living room was packed with familiar faces, neighbors, board members, her 2 little terrier dogs yapping like they sensed a storm coming. She stood at the front like some kind of suburban judge. We're here to determine the consequences of Mr. Zimmerman's dangerous and obstructive behavior, she announced. He locked my vehicle in his garage, causing damage and distress. The board must consider revoking his access to shared amenities, including the pool, clubhouse, and parking easement. I raised my hand. Point of order, I said. Your Lexus was not authorized to be in my garage in the first place. You entered my property without consent. That's not shared, that's trespassing. She pursed her lips. I had reasonable cause to believe the garage was unoccupied and available in an emergent circumstance. No, you assumed, and that's not how the law works, I said. Also, I have security footage showing your car was untouched for 3 days. No movement, no damage, which means either you're lying about the damage or something happened after I got back. A few neighbors shifted in their seats. I saw Dave in the back, arms crossed, nodding slowly. I also spoke with Deputy Morales, I continued. He's reviewing the footage, and if you keep pushing this, I'll file a formal trespassing complaint and a claim for HOA harassment. Beverly's face turned a shade redder than her lipstick. I'd advise the board to consider the liability of continuing down this path, I said, holding up a copy of the bylaws. Especially since I've also found 3 separate violations of your own procedures in how you called this meeting. One of the board members, a younger woman named Janelle, leaned forward. Which violations? I handed her the page. No 24-hour notice, no quorum verification. And you can't vote on sanctions unless the accused is given 5 days written notice. Janelle scanned the text. Another board member, a retired postal inspector named Ron, whistled low under his breath. I wasn't aware of that, he said. Beverly tried to steer things back. Regardless, the spirit of the rules is irrelevant, I said. The letter of the rules is what matters. And since we're talking about letters, I'd also like to submit a cease and desist for defamation. Because if you send one more false complaint to the sheriff's office, I'll file a civil suit. That shut the room up. Beverly stared at me, face tight, breathing shallow. The silence stretched. Finally, Ron cleared his throat. I think we need to postpone this meeting and consult legal counsel. The crowd murmured in agreement. I turned to leave. Good idea. Oh, and Beverly, next time you're worried about hail, try a car cover. I walked out with every pair of eyes following me. The next morning, I found a fresh envelope on my doorstep. Inside was a short note typed, "No signature. Parking incident considered resolved. No further action to be taken." No apology, no admission, just quiet surrender. I tossed it in the recycling and pulled out my phone. Time to send Morales that footage anyway. Because if she ever tried something like that again, I wasn't going to settle for a letter. I was going to take the HOA apart, one bylaw at a time. By midweek, the neighborhood had turned into something between a courtroom and a comedy show. Nobody was talking about landscaping or trash bins anymore. It was all whispers about Beverly, her dented Lexus, and the storm she'd stirred up trying to pin her mistake on someone who didn't flinch. I thought the drama might finally cool off. But then I got a call from Lee. "Zeke," she said, skipping pleasantries. "You might want to sit down. I was poking around the county clerk's filings for fun. Guess whose name showed up on a lien request for your house?" I didn't even need to answer. "She filed paperwork," Lee continued, "claiming you were delinquent on HOA dues. Said you were 6 months behind, which is funny since you've only lived there for 6. I stood frozen in my kitchen, coffee in hand, staring out the window at the street. "That's fraud." She listed her own signature as treasurer, which, by the way, she isn't. The board has a separate treasurer. This is beyond a turf war now. I hung up and checked my payment history. Every statement was clear. Dues paid monthly on time with confirmation receipts. I printed them all, dropped them in a folder, and drove straight to the county clerk's office. The woman behind the counter, a no-nonsense type with glasses on a beaded chain, took one look at the filing and shook her head. This kind of lien should have a hearing notice attached. "There's nothing here, no hearing, no judgment, no verification from a registered treasurer." "Can I contest it?" "You won't need to. This isn't legal. I'll flag it for fraud and hand it to our legal review office." I thanked her, but I wasn't done back home. I walked over to Ron's place. He opened the door still wearing his mail carrier ball cap, even though he'd been retired for years. "You hear about the lien she filed?" I asked, his jaw clenched. "She didn't run that by the board. She signed it herself. Claimed I was behind on dues." He stepped onto his porch and crossed his arms. "She's stepping in it this time. That's forgery, and if she sent that to the record office, it's a felony." I looked across the street. Beverly's window blinds twitched. "Mind if I ask you something?" I said. "Shoot. You ever seen her use HOA funds for personal stuff, anything that looked off?" Ron hesitated, then motioned me inside. "Few months back, I noticed she submitted reimbursement forms for community improvement supplies, but I never saw any improvements. Just new patio furniture on her deck. You think she's skimming?" "I think she's gotten too comfortable." That was enough for me. I spent the next 2 days compiling a packet. Copies of my payment records, the fraudulent lien filing, meeting minutes showing she bypassed the board, and a timeline of her behavior. Lee helped me phrase the complaint so it would stick. Then I walked it into the sheriff's office and handed it over to Deputy Morales. He read through it slowly, his expression darkening with each page. "She filed this lien herself?" he asked, signed as treasurer. "She's not the treasurer, exactly." He looked up at me. "I'll take this to the DA's office. If it checks out, they'll open an investigation." I nodded. "I also have reason to believe she's been reimbursing herself for things she bought for personal use. That'll fall under misappropriation of funds. We'll pull the HOA's financial records. If the board cooperates, this could go fast." I left with a strange sense of calm. I didn't need to win a shouting match. I just needed to let the truth do its work. By Saturday, things escalated fast. A county investigator showed up at Beverly's door with 2 deputies. They were polite but firm. I watched from my front step as she tried to play innocent, gesturing with exaggerated confusion. When they handed her a summons, she finally dropped the act. Her face twisted, mouth pinched, eyes darting. She disappeared inside, the door slamming behind her. Ron came walking over a few minutes later. "She's under investigation for falsifying documents and misuse of HOA funds. Apparently, they found 3 separate reimbursements for personal items. that new gas grill on her back patio. Paid for with HOA money. Any word on the lien? Clerk's office voided it. She might face a felony charge for filing it. DA requested her resignation from the board pending the outcome. I nodded slowly. And if she refuses, they can make it official through the bylaws. Special vote. We only need 2/3. That vote happened 3 days later, and it wasn't even close. Out of 37 homes in the subdivision, 31 voted to remove her. The rest abstained. No one backed her, not even her usual lapdogs on the board. The new president, Janelle, called for a full audit of HOA spending over the past year. Everything was on the table, every receipt, every form, every so-called improvement project. Turns out Beverly had been reimbursing herself for more than patio furniture. There were purchases for security upgrades that never existed, event decorations that were nowhere to be found, and a $1,200 charge listed as community morale enhancement, which turned out to be a spa weekend at her resort 2 towns over. When the audit report came out, it was so damning that the board voted unanimously to refer it to the district attorney's office. Beverly had embezzled over $7,000 in total. The sheriff's office arrested her within a week. She was charged with filing a fraudulent lien, misappropriation of funds, and official misconduct. Her mugshot made the local paper. The article quoted a county official as saying it was one of the most egregious abuses of HOA authority they'd seen in years. After her arrest, I got a knock on my door. It was Dave, the guy who'd seen her park in my garage. He held a 6-pack of decent craft beer and looked sheepish. "Figured I owed you one," he said. "I should have said something sooner." "You did enough," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." We cracked open a couple beers and watched the sun go down over a neighborhood that suddenly felt a whole lot quieter. The HOA held another meeting a week later, this time in the community center instead of someone's living room. Janelle laid out a new transparency policy, including public access to the budget, quarterly reviews, and a ban on board members submitting reimbursements without written pre-approval. Ron stood up at the end and said, "Let this be a lesson. We're neighbors, not tyrants. If we don't check each other now and then, power goes to the wrong heads." The room applauded. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. My garage was mine again. Beverly was facing real consequences. And the HOA had finally remembered what it was supposed to be. A group of people who lived next to each other, not some miniature regime. As I walked home, Dave jogged up behind me. "You really locked her car in there and just went camping?" he asked. "Sure did," he laughed. "Legendary?" I just smiled and kept walking. I figured I'd finally earned the right to enjoy some peace and quiet, maybe even hang a wind chime or two. The first sign that Beverly's downfall had left a deeper mess than anyone expected came the following Thursday, when a pair of county auditors showed up at the community clubhouse with briefcases and a court order. By then, Beverly's arrest had become the centerpiece of every neighborhood conversation. But what most of the residents didn't know, what I only found out because Janelle dropped it into my mailbox with a sticky note marked confidential, was that the financial audit had uncovered something far worse than patio furniture and spa days. Turns out, Beverly hadn't just been embezzling. She'd been forging signatures on proxy votes for years, inflating her control over board decisions. Several homeowners who had supposedly voted in favor of new fees or bylaw amendments had no idea their names had ever been used. And buried in the records was a bank transfer over $16,000 moved from the HOA's operating account to a private LLC registered under the name Cransford Civic Solutions, LLC. It didn't take a genius to see what she'd done. She created a shell company with a name that sounded official, billed the HOA for consulting services, and paid herself like a contractor. She'd been laundering neighborhood dues into her own pocket. The county investigators moved fast. By the following Monday, subpoenas were issued for all past financial records dating back 3 years. The HOA's bank accounts were temporarily frozen. Janelle, who had stepped up as interim president, held an emergency meeting, not one of those fake emergency meetings Beverly used to call whenever someone's lawn was 3 inches too shaggy, but a real, legitimate gathering with lawyers present and a public record. I sat near the back. The room was packed, standing room only. People weren't angry, they were stunned. No one had imagined how deep the manipulation went. Janelle stood at the front, hands resting on a pile of folders. "We're cooperating fully with the County Financial Crimes Unit," she said. "The district attorney has confirmed that they are pursuing charges for wire fraud, identity falsification, and misappropriation of public funds." Someone near the front asked what kind of sentence Beverly was looking at. Janelle didn't sugarcoat it. "If convicted on all counts. Minimum of 5 years. Possibly more, depending on what the IRS finds. There are signs she didn't report the income on her taxes." I leaned over to Ron, who was flipping through a printed copy of the audit summary. "That LLC, she ever mention it before?" He shook his head without looking up. "Never, and I was on the board the whole time." Another neighbor, a soft-spoken man named Elias, stood up. "What happens to the HOA now? Are we stuck with the debt?" Janelle raised a hand. "We've already contacted an independent fiduciary firm. They've agreed to assist in recovering misused funds. Most of the bank transfers can be traced. The county has frozen her assets pending trial. If we're lucky, we'll recover most of it." I didn't say anything. I was watching the people around me. These were folks who'd spent years nodding along as Beverly ran the HOA like her personal fiefdom. Now they were realizing they'd been played, and that maybe, just maybe, her obsession with control had cost them more than a few unfair fines. After the meeting, I stepped outside into the warm dusk. Dave was waiting by the flagpole, arms folded, a quiet look on his face that didn't suit his usual laid-back attitude. "You hear about the property taxes?" he asked. I frowned. "What about them?" She filed a change of use form for the clubhouse back in March. Claimed it was a commercial facility, not residential. That bumped the tax rate. "We've been overpaying since spring." I stared at him. "Why would she do that?" He shrugged. "More justification to raise dues, probably. Make it look like the HOA was in crisis so no one questioned where the funds were going. You think the county's gonna fix it? They're reviewing the classification. We might get reimbursed if it was fraudulently filed." I looked up at the clubhouse. Until recently, it had just been a quiet building where neighbors held potlucks and kids' birthday parties. Now it was evidence. The next morning, I got a knock at my door. It was Deputy Morales, this time dressed in a dark suit instead of his usual uniform. He looked more serious than I'd ever seen him. "Zeke," he said, "mind if I come in?" I stepped aside. "I wanted to let you know personally," he said, sitting down at my kitchen table. "Your garage locking it, documenting the footage, reporting the lien you kicked off something that's going to clean up more than just this neighborhood. We've got reports coming in from 3 other subdivisions under the same management company. Turns out Beverly wasn't just running one scam. She was advising other HOAs on how to do the same." I blinked. "She ran a whole network," he nodded. "She pitched herself as a civic consultant. Some of those boards followed her advice. We've already opened investigations in 2 adjacent towns. You may be asked to testify, not just as a victim, but as a witness." I leaned back in my chair. "You're telling me she turned HOA corruption into a business model?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." He slid a contact sheet across the table. "DA's office will be in touch. They're building a case that goes well beyond forged votes and misused funds." After he left, I sat in silence for a long time. It was one thing to battle a petty tyrant in your own backyard. It was another to find out she'd been exporting that tyranny like a franchise. Over the next 2 weeks, things shifted fast. The board held a vote to dissolve the previous management contract and replace it with a homeowner-led oversight committee. Janelle introduced a proposal to limit presidential terms to 1 year with a mandatory rotation. No one objected. The clubhouse was reclassified correctly, which lowered our overall tax burden. The extra fees were rolled back. Several neighbors received refunds for fines Beverly had issued without board approval. And in one final twist, the county assessor's office revealed that Beverly had filed for a senior property tax exemption using falsified birth records, shaving nearly $800 a year off her own bill. That charge alone came with its own felony tag. The trial date was set for mid-autumn. I was called as the lead witness for the lien fraud portion. When I took the stand, the prosecutor asked me a simple question. "What did you do when you discovered the defendant's car in your garage?" I said. "I locked the door and went camping." The courtroom laughed. Even the judge cracked a grin. The verdict came back in under 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: wire fraud, forgery, embezzlement, tax evasion, misrepresentation of public documents. She was sentenced to 6 years in state prison with eligibility for parole after 4. Her assets, including that now infamous Lexus, were seized to repay the HOA and the other neighborhoods she defrauded. The day after sentencing, a neighborhood barbecue was held on the Greenbelt. Janelle brought a cake decorated with a clipboard and handcuffs. Ron read a short statement thanking everyone for staying engaged and not letting fear keep them silent. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. Don't ignore the little things. Because sometimes, locking your garage is the only thing standing between you and a 6-year federal investigation. That got a bigger laugh than I expected. I stepped back and let the next guy take the mic. Life didn't return to normal after that. It got better. People started waving to each other again. The board meetings became casual, open, even funny at times. The fines stopped being arbitrary. And for the first time since I moved in, the HOA became what it was always supposed to be: a group of neighbors working together, not against each other. I replaced the dented garage door with a reinforced one, installed a new keypad, and added a small engraved plaque on the inside. It read, "Private property, no exceptions," just in case anyone ever forgot.